Oh, I was there, hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was a...
Really? I thought...
Well, was it? Well, I can tell you now, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did. You know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish.
You're absolutely right. I mean, what I discovered was, of course, that she was hunting for a man and there's no doubt she targeted Harry.
The whole thing was just stage managed to suit them.
This is not the Harry he was a few years ago. And the only reason he's not like that is he's following the requests of Meghan. He said himself, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets.
And so he was angry, and I felt, you know, we were punished for that.
That day was genuinely awful, and I mean every word. It was the most uncomfortable royal occasion I had ever sat through. Nothing felt natural from the very beginning. Everything was overly planned, completely hollow. It looked more like a scripted show than a real milestone. The whole thing screamed staged performance, not true happiness. The tension in the air was suffocating. He looked clearly troubled, and instead of receiving comfort, the crowd felt blamed for something beyond anyone's control. The camera crew was a total nightmare, standing just 5 feet away, making it impossible to catch anything honest or real. You felt completely overlooked, as though your presence held zero value. The entire arrangement seemed built for a handful of viewers watching from across the globe, not for those physically standing right there. The crushing blow came when the carriage rolled straight by. I desperately wanted one look, one real moment of recognition, but received absolutely nothing.
And the photographers they engaged for the job was 5 feet away. You know, it was just hopeless. And then the carriage shot, when they went past me in the carriage, they looked the other way. So for me, it was a disaster. And
well, was that deliberate? You were made to feel unwelcome
I
at the
felt
wedding?
so. I felt it wasn't just me; it was the whole of the British press.
They looked completely past the people who had shown up to support them. That is when it clicked for me. This had nothing to do with connection or genuine celebration. It was pure theater, and everyone watching was simply background decoration. I have covered some truly moving royal weddings: King Charles's, Prince William's, Prince Andrew's, Sophie and Edward's. Each carried real warmth and tradition, but Windsor that day felt entirely different and not in any positive sense. I genuinely wanted to walk away as quickly as possible. What truly stood out was the guest list. Beyond one family member she actually knew, the remaining guests were celebrities who barely recognized her face. That is staggering for a day meant to feel personal and meaningful. A royal wedding should honor genuine bonds, but this resembled a Hollywood showcase instead. The energy was completely wrong. What viewers did not realize was how many total outsiders packed that guest list. These were not just a few unfamiliar faces. We are talking about people she had genuinely never encountered. Several major names flatly declined. Reese Witherspoon reportedly questioned why she would attend a wedding where she did not know the couple. That was not one isolated reaction. It revealed a massive disconnect between the bride and her actual invitees. But here is the thing. Harry appeared completely blind to every warning sign.
When I think, you know, I've done some really lovely royal weddings. I did both King Charles's weddings. I did William's wedding. I did Andrew's wedding. I did Sophie and Edward. You know, I mean, they were lovely occasions. But that today, I couldn't get out of Windsor quick enough. I promise you that.
The worst royal wedding.
His entire attention was locked on making her vision happen as quickly as humanly possible. The pressure she applied was overwhelming, almost as though she needed to plant herself firmly in that world of power and status immediately. When the grand wedding vision started meeting resistance from people close to them and outside observers, she shifted her approach entirely. Based on various reports, she rolled out a deliberate strategy to secure Harry's absolute loyalty and dedication. It was no longer about a single day. It was about making their bond completely unshakable for everything ahead. She was calculated and methodical about locking down his commitment. This raised deeply troubling questions about what was truly unfolding behind closed doors. Was she clinging to something unstable or constructing a connection so ironclad that nothing could shatter it? The true picture was far more layered than what the public ever witnessed. She apparently persuaded Harry that his closest companions and long-standing friends were unnecessary at the ceremony. She presented it as wanting something private, just the two of them together. He trusted her completely and agreed to remove several of his oldest and most devoted friends. Imagine a wedding where the groom's lifelong companions are noticeably missing from the room. That single detail reveals everything about what was genuinely taking place.
Events that happened on the actual wedding day itself. The guest list beyond the lone family member she invited was simply inviting celebrities who were total strangers to her. I could see, especially with a wedding of this scale, inviting a handful of people who you do not know, but certainly not to this extent. There were a huge amount of guests who she had never met. Some people didn't even come. Like, for example, Reese Witherspoon said, "Why would I go? I don't even know them."
But that is not even the most shocking element. Enter the celebrity guests she personally handpicked. This was not random at all. It was part of a broader, deeply intentional blueprint. Meghan was thinking several steps ahead, constructing a backup circle beyond the royal institution. She wanted powerful ties in the entertainment world as a safety net in case royal life failed to deliver what she envisioned. By surrounding herself with influential figures, she would hold connections and leverage regardless of what came next. Strategic, without question. Her Hollywood roots shaped every decision here. Her guest list overflowed with major celebrities from film and music. To the outside world, it appeared she was simply blending her entertainment background into royal tradition, but there was far more happening beneath that surface. According to those who studied the situation closely, this was pure calculation. Those guests were not simply there to celebrate love. They were individual pieces within a much larger web of power and influence. Long before Harry and Meghan ever publicly discussed stepping away from royal duties, that wedding was already functioning as a launching platform. They were planting alliances and engineering their future beyond palace walls. Consider it like sowing seeds that would eventually bloom. The entire global spectacle watched by hundreds of millions was concealing something profoundly deeper. It was quietly laying the groundwork for something far greater than anyone could comprehend at the time.
All my life, you know, and then Oprah Winfrey had met them once. She was a guest. The Clooneys, you know, the guests. I mean, never met them before, but they were the guests. And, you know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz.
Everyone assumed the royal family stood completely united at that wedding. But within just months, everything began unraveling dramatically. His book, Spare, landed and exposed deeply private family matters that stunned absolutely everyone. What had appeared as unbreakable solidarity turned out to rest on completely unstable ground. When they sat down for that Oprah interview, everything shifted permanently. They held nothing back. They laid out every detail about the immense pressure and hidden struggles festering behind palace walls. Then their Netflix projects arrived. These were not lighthearted documentaries. They were raw, unflinching explorations of painful family conflict that kept audiences completely captivated. The story grew bigger and more tangled with every new project they released into the world. Industry analyst Duncan Larcombe made it absolutely clear that the real trouble did not appear out of nowhere. According to his assessment, everything ignited right after the wedding ceremony concluded. That fairytale moment that appeared to signal a fresh beginning actually marked the precise turning point where everything shifted beneath the surface. That was when loyalties transformed and hidden tensions began quietly multiplying. The wedding was never a celebration. It was ground zero for the storm that followed. Royal biographer Angela Levin added critical perspective to the entire situation back in 2017. While completing Harry's biography, she arranged to meet him personally to confirm certain information and details.
You know, most of that interview was left on the cutting room floor because it was so one-sided and it was so unfair. And I think about watching it now, and you know, the bit about Archie and the colour of his skin. And I knew they'd be seething. I knew the Queen would be seething. I knew that the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, would be seething. It would be.
What unfolded at his home left her genuinely shaken. One of his staff members pulled her quietly aside and delivered a serious caution. The message was blunt: tread very carefully whenever Meghan's name entered the conversation. Harry was far more emotionally fragile about her than anyone had suspected. Whenever her name surfaced, he would become visibly tense and deeply unsettled. This occurred before their engagement had even been revealed to the public. The world remained completely unaware, yet behind closed doors they were already mapping out their shared future together. Wedding preparations were quietly underway while this simmering tension remained hidden from everyone. Nobody on the outside had the slightest idea what was coming. The staff member made it unmistakably clear that if Levin pressed too hard or continued raising Meghan's name, Harry might become so distressed that he would ask her to leave immediately. That was not casual advice. That was a glaring and serious red flag. Levin had already begun noticing changes in Harry's behavior. He appeared guarded, distracted, and burdened by something entirely unfamiliar. She recognized that his emotional foundation was quietly shifting beneath him. Something deeper was clearly happening that no one outside his innermost circle could detect or understand. This particular moment laid bare just how fragile things truly were beneath that flawless and polished royal exterior.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, what I discovered was, of course, that she was hunting for a man in England from 2013 onwards, when her marriage had crashed and she couldn't find anyone in Canada at the time. And she wanted wealth and she wanted fame. And there's no doubt she targeted Harry and found someone who was a childhood friend of his who could introduce them. And then on the days before they met at their blind meeting in a club in London, she researched Harry very carefully and knew exactly what buttons to press.
Meghan's presence was quietly reshaping everything long before she had officially entered the royal fold. Harry, long celebrated for his fierce loyalty, appeared almost immediately and completely drawn under her spell. The effects began surfacing in unexpected places, particularly around long-standing royal customs. Consider the tiara situation. Those were never simply decorative accessories. Each piece carried deep history, symbolic meaning, and strict protocols around when and where it could appear publicly. There existed an entire unspoken code governing which tiara belonged in which setting. Getting it wrong carried serious consequences. Meghan had her heart set on a breathtaking emerald tiara, a genuinely stunning piece with an exotic origin tied to Russian heritage. But this was far from a straightforward style preference. It ignited serious conflict behind closed doors. The core issue was that the tiara carried complicated historical associations. Many believed it had entered the royal collection immediately following the Russian Revolution. Its connection to that deeply turbulent political chapter raised enormous concerns among those who understood such nuances. Many viewed wearing it publicly as potentially divisive and inflammatory. Everything we have uncovered about Harry and Meghan's path together points to a story running far deeper than surface-level controversy. From that meticulously engineered wedding ceremony to their dramatic departure from royal life, what we are examining is a masterclass in deliberate planning and complete narrative domination.
How on earth can he stay with her? And the same then happened when they went to Tommy Inskip's wedding in Jamaica, which is a great friend of Harry's, who in the end was banned from the dinner after their wedding.
Yeah, well, I know at least 3 of the very good friends were apparently
banned, all by Meghan.
And then they saw all these celebrities filing it.
Exactly.
Who'd known her about 3 minutes.
Yeah, if that.
What presented itself as a fairy tale beginning was in reality the groundwork for something far more calculated and layered. The pieces did not simply fall into alignment by chance. They were deliberately placed, intentionally moved, and executed with remarkable precision. Begin by examining what that wedding truly represented beneath its glossy exterior. It was never simply 2 individuals exchanging vows. It was the opening act of a complete restructuring of relationships and loyalties. The guest list exposes the real agenda. Overflowing with A-list celebrities, she barely recognized personally powerful entertainment figures from Hollywood and the music world, and conspicuously missing were Harry's oldest and most trusted companions. This was no oversight or oversight. This was purely strategic maneuvering. Meghan was constructing an external network from the very first moment. She was engineering a support structure, a contingency plan, an emergency exit before she had even formally joined the institution. Sit with that reality for a moment. Before the engagement was ever announced publicly, before a single wedding invitation was dispatched, she was already engineering her eventual departure. She was already envisioning a future requiring powerful allies planted within the celebrity universe. That is not the mindset of someone genuinely embracing royal life with an open heart.
She's a creature of Hollywood. She knows that celebrity images is what earns the money, and that's what she must protect.
That is the mindset of someone who viewed it as temporary, merely a stepping stone towards something considerably grander. The deliberate removal of Harry's closest companions was equally calculated. According to what biographer Bauer carefully documented, Meghan persuaded Harry that his long-standing friends were simply unnecessary at the ceremony. She packaged it as wanting something intimate and private, just the 2 of them in their own world. But what genuinely occurred was the systematic dismantling of his entire support structure. She cut him off from the individuals who understood him most deeply, the people capable of providing him honest and unfiltered counsel, the people who had stood firmly beside him long before she ever entered the picture. By the time they walked together down that aisle, Harry was already emotionally reliant on her for his sense of worth and direction. He had severed bonds with his oldest companions at her quiet suggestion. He was shaping every decision through her lens, and she had firmly established herself as his sole emotional foundation. That is a textbook isolation strategy, and it executed flawlessly. Angela Levin's account of visiting Harry to wrap up his biography offers a deeply unsettling glimpse into what was unfolding privately. When a staff member pulled her aside and cautioned her to proceed with extreme care around any mention of Meghan, that warning stood as a red flag of monumental proportions. Harry was anxious and visibly on edge at the mere sound of Meghan's name. He would grow noticeably distressed, and this pattern existed before the world had any knowledge of their relationship, before any engagement announcement, before any wedding discussions had even surfaced publicly.
I thought that was just so disgraceful, what she said, what Harry said, and I'm a monarchist, and I just don't think she should have been allowed to say those things unchallenged by Oprah Winfrey. It was scandalous. So I embarked on this book to actually understand what sort of person actually launches that sort of unfair, untrue attack on the royal family.
Before any public declaration had been made, he was already this emotionally volatile surrounding her. That level of raw sensitivity and fierce defensiveness almost always signals active manipulation. When someone conditions you to feel afraid of simply mentioning another person's name, when they have convinced you that their emotional state outweighs honest and open dialogue, that is a clear control dynamic at work. And Levin identified it without hesitation. She could observe the fragility radiating from Harry. She could feel that something fundamental was rewiring his emotional core, yet she received a firm warning to remain completely silent about it. The Tiara conflict crystallized the entire power struggle that had been quietly intensifying beneath the surface. Meghan had her heart absolutely fixed on that emerald piece. It was undeniably breathtaking. It was exotic and carried genuine Russian heritage. But it also arrived with significant historical weight attached. Its association with the Russian Revolution made wearing it potentially inflammatory and politically divisive in the eyes of many. The royal family understood these layers intuitively because they had navigated them for generations spanning centuries. Queen Elizabeth did not refuse because she was being rigid or unnecessarily old-fashioned. She refused because she deeply understood the immense symbolic power that every object carries.
If she wants to speak, if she wants to talk to someone before him, he steps back. He's very nervous. And I think that she commands it all, quite obviously, because this is not the Harry he was a few years ago. And the only reason he's not like that is he's following the requests of Meghan. He said himself, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. And that's what it's like.
She understood that every item worn publicly, every spoken word, every public appearance broadcasts a message to the world. But Meghan remained entirely indifferent to that broader context. She wanted what she had decided she wanted, and when that desire was denied, it planted a seed of deep and lasting resentment within her. This friction exposed the fundamental incompatibility between Meghan's personal worldview and the centuries-old architecture of royal protocol. She treated tradition as an unnecessary obstacle blocking her path. The Queen treated it as the essential foundation holding the entire institution together. When Harry and Meghan publicly announced their intention to step back from senior duties, the Queen's response remained measured, composed, and remarkably calm. She was not blindsided because those closest to the situation had anticipated this moment for several months prior. This was never an impulsive reaction born of frustration. This was the deliberate execution of a long-constructed strategy. Meghan had been quietly engineering this exit long before they ever exchanged rings. She had carefully positioned her celebrity network. She had systematically isolated Harry from his existing support circle. She had firmly established herself as the primary voice driving his major decisions. She had constructed the psychological architecture that would ultimately enable him to abandon everything he had ever known. And when the critical moment arrived, it unfolded exactly as designed. They stepped away. They secured Netflix agreements.
And also she pushes Harry out the way,
Oh,
or she pulls him, if she wants to go and he's still talking, she pulls him and she gives him a look and he has to come with her. I don't think she realises that we all see that. Who does that?
They launched their personal media enterprise and never once glanced backward. But here is where the narrative takes a genuinely fascinating turn. After departing the royal institution, simply vanishing was never a viable option for them. They required complete control over their own story, because if they remained silent, outside voices would shape that story for them. So they positioned themselves across from opera, not for a casual and unscripted exchange, but for a meticulously orchestrated media event engineered to sculpt public perception in their favor. They opened up about personal hardships, about alleged racist commentary, about mental health battles, about feeling completely abandoned by the institution that was supposed to support them. Every single claim was delivered without any challenge present. Every allegation went entirely uncontested throughout. They owned the entire narrative from beginning to end. They assumed the role of wronged parties. They became the figures deserving of public sympathy. They positioned themselves as the righteous ones, and the global audience consumed every word without reservation. Millions tuned in to watch. Millions chose to believe their account entirely. Millions aligned themselves squarely against the royal family as a direct result. Then their Netflix projects materialized. These were not breezy, lighthearted documentaries. They were deeply personal, ongoing explorations of their private lives, their hardships, their victories, their complete perspective on every chapter of what had unfolded, season following season, project layered upon project.
Meghan had her heart set on this tiara with emeralds, and Prince Harry hit the roof when they were told it was impossible for her to wear. Provenance of the tiara could not be established. There were concerns that it could have come from Russia originally. There was a very heated exchange that prompted the Queen to speak to Harry. She said, Meghan cannot have whatever she wants. She gets what tiaras she's given by me.
Each installment peeled back a fresh layer of their story, each one surfacing more intimate revelations, each one keeping the global audience utterly fixated on their unfolding saga. They successfully transformed themselves from working royals into full-blown celebrities, and they possessed a far sharper understanding of celebrity mechanics than they ever held of royal protocol. They instinctively knew how to feed the relentless media machine. They understood precisely how to sustain widespread public interest. They knew exactly how to convert their personal story into serious financial gain. Then Harry released his memoir, Spare. Not a thoughtfully composed and measured reflection on his life journey, but a raw and completely unfiltered release of deeply private family information. He addressed his mental health openly, his personal battles, his accumulated resentment toward his own family. He exposed private conversations. He revealed details that by every reasonable standard should have remained confidential, yet from his perspective, he was finally speaking his truth. He was pursuing healing. He was working through genuine trauma. From the royal family's perspective, he had become a betrayer. He was incinerating relationships. He was violating sacred trust. He was choosing her vision over his own blood. And every single occasion he made that particular choice, it cemented Meghan standing more deeply within his world. Every moment he reinforced her version of events, he drifted further and further from his own family.
And she hated being a member of the royal family, and she's not someone who wants to take sixth position. Harry's sixth in line to the throne. She didn't like that. She wants to be out there in front. So she doesn't want to come.
It was a deliberate and carefully sequenced progression, each step engineered to intensify his emotional reliance on her, each calculated move designed to render any future reconciliation increasingly and perhaps permanently impossible. Because here lies the dimension of Meghan's influence that people consistently resist discussing with complete candor. It is total and unconditional. Royal analyst Robert Levin documented this pattern with unmistakable clarity. Harry does not execute major decisions without her direct approval and agreement. If she withholds her endorsement, the matter simply does not proceed. She actively participates in crafting his speeches and public statements. She molds his messaging to the outside world. She maintains a firm grip on his media presence and public image. She steers the course of his most consequential decisions. That is not an equal partnership operating on mutual respect. That is not two individuals sharing power. That is complete dominance cleverly dressed in the language of romantic devotion. He has been reduced to a supporting character within her authored story rather than remaining the lead in his own. His authentic voice has been steadily quieted. His individual perspective has been consistently eclipsed. His personal independence has been methodically and thoroughly dismantled. And he appears to have accepted this entirely because it arrives wrapped in the framing of profound love. It is presented as unshakable loyalty. It is sold to him as the two of them standing united against a hostile world. But what is genuinely unfolding is something considerably darker and more troubling. What we are collectively observing is the complete and systematic transformation of a deeply vulnerable man by someone armed with unmistakable ambition and razor-sharp strategic intelligence. Harry entered this relationship already carrying considerable damage. He lost his mother under traumatic and devastating circumstances. He wrestled with his role and purpose within the rigid royal hierarchy. He felt profoundly like an outsider even within his own family structure. He was actively searching for genuine meaning and human connection. Then Meghan entered, self-assured, driven, and carrying a vivid vision of an entirely different kind of life. She extended to him an escape route he had never been offered before. She presented herself as someone who would place him at the absolute center of her universe, someone prepared to fight fiercely on his behalf, someone who would make him feel truly seen and genuinely chosen above everything else.
Of course he's scared of Meghan, he's terrified of her. I think he would have gone away a long time ago. I think she's completely controlling him. And you see now that he's absolutely used to being behind her.
But what did that ultimately cost him? He is now completely cut off from his own family. He barely maintains any communication with his father. His once close relationship with his brother lies in complete ruin. He has severed contact with the overwhelming majority of his oldest companions. He depends entirely on her for emotional validation and reassurance. He depends on her entirely for guidance around career-related choices. He depends on her to shape how he presents and positions himself before the entire world. He exists within a dynamic where her contentment hinges directly on his total compliance, where his perceived worth is measured purely by how much he willingly surrenders for the advancement of her vision. That is not love in any genuine sense. That is entrapment operating beneath the disguise of devotion. And the most heartbreaking dimension of all is that he has likely lost the clarity to even recognize it anymore. What we are genuinely watching unfold is a textbook demonstration of how an individual can successfully occupy the role of victim while quietly and systematically dismantling everything surrounding them. The Queen extended fairness to all. The royal institution maintained its protocols for entirely legitimate and historically grounded reasons. Traditions existed because they carried genuine and enduring purpose, refined and tested across multiple centuries. But when a single individual determines that their personal desires hold greater weight than institutional continuity, than family bonds, than the accumulated wisdom of history, that is the precise moment when collapse becomes inevitable. And Meghan made that deliberate choice. She decided her personal ambitions carried more significance than honoring the institution Harry was born into by destiny. She decided her individual comfort mattered more than preserving his family connections. She decided her version of events held more validity than anyone else's lived reality. The wedding was never simply an occasion. It was a launching platform. Everything that followed was entirely foreseeable if you possessed the clarity to see what was genuinely operating beneath the polished surface. The engineered guest list, the cultivated celebrity network, the isolation of Harry, the systematic removal of his support foundation, the psychological rewiring of his emotional dependencies, the firm establishment of herself as his primary decision-maker, every single element served as groundwork. Every piece was careful preparation for what was coming next. The departure, the media offensive, the complete ownership of the narrative, the transformation of deeply personal conflict into a worldwide obsession. And it delivered exactly what was intended. They evolved from senior royals into globally recognized celebrities. They constructed a thriving media empire from the ground up. They secured contracts worth multiple millions. They became cultural voices commenting on their very own lives and choices. They monetized their personal suffering. They converted family conflict into profitable content. They built an entire commercial industry centered entirely around their own story. That does not represent failure by any conventional measure. That represents extraordinary success measured entirely by their own defined terms. They achieved precisely what they set out to obtain: power, influence, substantial wealth, and absolute narrative control. But here is the most important understanding to carry away as we reflect on this entire unfolding saga. This transcends the story of two individuals. This speaks to power dynamics embedded within modern intimate relationships. This reveals how emotional closeness can be deliberately weaponized as an instrument of control. This demonstrates how an individual can occupy the position of victim while simultaneously serving as the architect of widespread destruction. This is about how controlling the story consistently matters more than the underlying truth. This is about how celebrity culture perpetually elevates drama above genuine substance and meaning. This is about how a sufficiently compelling narrative can override documented reality entirely. This is about how audiences can be systematically guided toward accepting a carefully constructed version of events that serves a singular set of interests. Looking back now at that wedding day that appeared so flawless, so overflowing with genuine joy, so full of hopeful promise, we can finally recognize it for its true nature. It was a calculated opening move within a far larger and more consequential game. It was a deliberate first step in a complete life restructuring. It was the moment a deeply vulnerable man was positioned to become permanently dependent on a profoundly ambitious woman who held clear and unwavering plans for how to deploy that dependence. Everything that unfolded afterward was simply the inevitable realization of what had been quietly set in motion that very day. This story continues evolving with every passing month. Fresh revelations will surface. New projects will emerge. More carefully managed drama will be released into public. More calculated attempts to own and shape the narrative will follow without hesitation. Because once you have constructed an entire empire built upon personal conflict, you must perpetually sustain that conflict to keep the empire generating returns. You require fresh controversy, fresh disclosures, fresh reasons compelling enough to maintain public attention and engagement. And they have demonstrated repeatedly, and without reservation, their complete willingness to mind their own families' most private and painful struggles to generate that necessary content. They have proven they will surrender relationships in exchange for relevance and audience ratings. They have shown that no boundary carries sufficient sanctity to remain uncrossed when crossing it advances their personal narrative. So now that you hold the complete picture clearly in view, now that you can trace precisely how every piece connects to the next, now that you genuinely understand what was operating beneath the polished and celebrated surface, we want to hear directly from you. Does this story read the way we have presented it? Do you believe Meghan operated strategically and manipulatively, or was she simply someone striving to escape a world that was genuinely incompatible with who she was? Do you see Harry as a victim of circumstance, or as a fully willing and conscious participant in this unfolding narrative? Do you believe the royal family mishandled the entire situation, or did they ultimately respond with appropriate restraint and dignity? Drop your perspective in the comments section below. Share your honest viewpoint with the FameX community. This story carries weight far beyond a single couple's choices. It speaks to power, to influence, to the mechanics of how modern celebrity culture truly operates, to how individuals can bend and reshape shared reality through deliberate narrative control. If this deep exploration helped you connect the dots and genuinely understand what has been happening behind those tightly closed doors, if you can now clearly see the connections we have been carefully laying out for you, hit that like button right now. Share this with everyone in your circle who deserves to understand the full and unfiltered story. Subscribe to FameX because we are fully committed to uncovering the real narratives, the buried angles, and the hidden connections that no one else is willing to pursue or present. Thank you sincerely for watching. Thank you for engaging deeply with this story, and we will see you in the next one.